Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. A number of Republicans during the impeachment debate yesterday made the point, House Republicans, that President Trump explicitly stated in his speech to rally goers on January 6th, "We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard," in suggesting that the incitement to riot is a difficult claim to make based on the actual words the president used. In addition to that, while they were debating the words the president used on January 6th, he offered more about violence, a video that he released for national consumption during the impeachment debate yesterday.
As I have said, the incursion of the U.S. Capitol struck at the very heart of our republic. It angered and appalled millions of Americans across the political spectrum. I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement.
And he went on to talk prospectively about violence per reporting and a Secret Service briefing that he got about planned protests in advance of the January 20th inauguration of Joe Biden.
Those who engaged in the attacks last week will be brought to justice. Now I am asking everyone who has ever believed in our agenda to be thinking of ways to ease tensions, calm tempers, and help to promote peace in our country. There has been reporting that additional demonstrations are being planned in the coming days, both here in Washington and across the country. I have been briefed by the U.S. Secret Service on the potential threats. Every American deserves to have their voice heard in a respectful and peaceful way. That is your First Amendment right. But I cannot emphasize that there must be no violence, no law-breaking, and no vandalism of any kind.
All right, that's pretty clear. What is unclear is exactly what happened at the Capitol on January 6th. And that's unclear in part because the FBI is still investigating, and as apparently new information has become available, they're changing their tune a little bit, according to reporting, including from CNN, by the way, suggesting that there may have been advanced planning and coordination that was part of the violence and the rioting that ensued. For more on that, we're pleased to be joined by Frank Figliuzzi. He is a former head of FBI counterintelligence, author of The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. Frank, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I'm glad we can squeeze this in and talk about not only the book, but its application to what's happening in our country right now.
Well, let's talk about its application here, the FBI investigation into January 6th, in addition to the preparation for January 20th in D.C. and elsewhere. Give us your assessment of, in terms of where we're at and what we know and the questions we still are asking in order to find the people who were the people responsible for the violence that was committed.
Yeah, we've got more questions than answers, don't we, this morning? And the answers are going to come slowly, but I don't think they're going to be pretty. What we know so far on kind of the good news side is that the FBI has now acknowledged that they did provide intelligence about violence concerns to the Capitol Police, to the Washington Metropolitan Police, in fact, to the entire law enforcement of the Capital Region. So did NYPD Intelligence Unit, by the way. So that's kind of the good news. We also hear that the FBI actually now says they disrupted the travel of well over a dozen leaders that were going to organize and commit the worst violence, that they were all already under investigation by the FBI. And my sources tell me the Capitol incident could have been even worse, if you can imagine that. But here's the bad news. The bad news is obvious. We've had a security failure, not an intelligence failure. The intelligence was available. You and I could have sat back at home and watched it play out on social media for about 2 weeks. But the Capitol Police did not have sufficient resources. That was a deliberate decision. I want to know Who made that call? How high up did it go? How come there are 15 Capitol Police officers under suspension or investigation right now? What has happened? What's the current threat? What's the role of Congress members allegedly giving tours in the days before the insurrection to the very people who might have organized it? This country is under threat right now and hasn't faced this kind of security threat since 9/11.
Well, the police chief at the Capitol Police, he resigned, so maybe he has some culpability there. But I saw a video yesterday where you can see people with a map of the Capitol, and this one woman who she's leaning her head into a broken window and saying, "Go to the left, then go to the right, then break down to the floor below that." So this was a very well planned attack. And are you surprised that Capitol Police refused the help of the FBI and other National Guards?
I'm shocked and I'm disturbed by it, but people need to go to prison for this, and it needs to include, if it's true, any of the Congress members who played a role in this. This is sedition. This is an insurrection, and we need those answers. But while we're all pondering this, the FBI is racing against the clock to not only round up those people who did that day, but to figure out who's next. What's the next attack? What is the inauguration like? What's the threat to state capitals and state houses around the country? You've seen the FBI intelligence bulletin go out to all of these authorities. We are facing an unprecedented situation. And while D.C. is going to be a very hard target, you've seen tanks and troops roll in and trucks, and there's going to be a hard perimeter. You know what bad guys and terrorists do when they see a hardened perimeter, a hard target. They find a soft target, and those soft targets may well be state houses and Capitol buildings. Add that to the intel they have that there is a plan for those locations, and we've got a perilous week or two ahead of us.
Well, parallel to what happened on January 6th, the Capitol has been rioting that continues to occur in places like Portland at the hands of Antifa, also Manhattan, also San Diego. And there's some suggestion by those on the ground on January 6th that there were agent provocateurs there as well, instigators of some of the violence that were not, rank and file Trump supporters. How is the FBI or would the FBI parse through all of that to figure out what happened on January 6th at the Capitol, but then also to make preparations for the violence that we saw throughout the country over the summer last year and at the hands of Antifa is still ongoing?
So my FBI sources tell me that they are facing an unprecedented, daunting challenge. As you said, is it possible that a handful of non-Trump supporters, a handful of people who identify with Antifa or BLM might have been there along for the ride or instigating? I can't rule anything out right now. We are upside down in this country. I can tell you this, the challenge for law enforcement, the challenge for an agency like the FBI is to make sense of all of this while under pressure of time deadlines. So they're going through facial recognition. They're looking at videos. They're looking at geolocation of your cell phone. They don't really care. This is the message of the book, by the way. It's an attempt to remind people the FBI rank and file is not politicized. They don't care. They don't look at who's a Democrat or a Republican or Antifa or Boogaloo Boys or QAnon. If you're a bad actor, you're going to be in handcuffs. That's what they're looking at right now. But the social media aspect of this is an avalanche of leads and tips, and they've got to get this done by the inauguration. They've got to get it done right now.
Yeah, 45,000 tips and counting they've received. But what about the police officers? You can see them, taking away the barricade to let them in. There's another video of 6 of them just having them walk in, and then they're taking selfies. What do you think should happen to those 10 to 15 police officers?
Well, look, when you see that crowd, not the masses that kind of wandered behind the organizers and couldn't believe they were inside the building, I'm talking about the signs like you're pointing to, the signs not only that barricades were moved, that selfies were being taken and joking was going on with Capitol Police, but also the signs that people up front breaching those doors, trapping that Capitol Police officer in that secured door, killing a Capitol Police officer with a fire extinguisher. Those aren't random off-the-street protesters. Those people have tactical experience, and the more we learn about this, the more we learn that active and former law enforcement and military were likely involved in training and in pushing this thing forward. It's going to be disturbing, and while we're doing that, have we reached the time in our country where rooftop snipers deployed to the inauguration need to not only train on the crowd, but train on the cops? Who can we trust? Who can we not? We've got a problem in this country, and it's not going away simply because the current president leaves office.
Some of the reporting was that you were talking about federal law enforcement and administration agencies like Homeland Security providing intel and providing and offering support for Capitol Police in preparation of January 6th. And the reporting was Capitol Police were reluctant, even rebuffed some of those advances because of concerns about the optics. They didn't want to be perceived as being heavy-handed. They didn't want to be perceived as the way that federal law enforcement was treated when they descended on Portland after they tried to burn out a federal courthouse there. What is that? If that's true, and it seems plausible, what does that say about sort of the culture within law enforcement agencies, too, that needs to be challenged? You can't worry about optics. You need to worry about public safety.
Well, you've raised an interesting point about what has brought police departments around the country to focus, perhaps even overly so, on how things look. We've done this to ourselves, right? I get that optics are important. I get that this is our iconic building for democracy. The Capitol building is the symbol around the world of democracy, and you don't want it ringed with military troops and guys in riot gear. I get that, but we've evolved or devolved to this because of a summer of riots around the country where now everybody is saying this was overbearing. This was riot police. We can't have this on our streets. And so it's you cannot win at this point. But look at the optics now. The world, the Kremlin, Beijing, Tehran, North Korea, all our allies, all looking at the optics now of National Guardsmen sleeping inside the Capitol, trying to prevent the Capitol from coming down during the inauguration. The optics couldn't be worse.
He is Frank Figliuzzi, former head of FBI counterintelligence, author of the book, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. Frank, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
I'm glad we could do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If your money is not earning at least 2.5% guaranteed as well as tax deferred, you need to call Professional Life and Casualty. Professional Life and Casualty is offering a 2.5% guaranteed APR on new funds deposited into your annuity, traditional IRA, or Roth IRA accounts. Rates subject to change. Please call to confirm. With Professional Life and Casualty, you pay no surrender charges, no administrative fees, and no withdrawal fees. Professional Life and Casualty has been providing peace of mind insurance and annuity products for over 60 years. Visit plcinsurance.com. They'll send you a free guide to tax-deferred, no-fee annuities. Learn about the 2.5% guaranteed APR return on annuity, traditional IRA, or Roth IRAs with no surrender charges, no administrative fees, and no withdrawal fees, plus peace of mind. Only from Professional Life and Casualty. Call 1-800-651-1800. That's 1-800-651-1800 or online at plcinsurance.com.
Oh, I just did it. Took my Balance of Nature. It's got wonderful things inside. Lots of vitamin D, vitamin B, vitamin